November had always been quiet in the small town of Evergreen Hollow. The vibrant fall leaves turned into brittle husks on the ground, and the biting cold set in before winter's snow. For Elise, November meant the anniversary of her mother's passing, a time that came with a wave of melancholy. This November was different, though. It wasn't just the usual sadness that hung in the air, it was a suffocating sense of being watched, of something lurking just beyond sight. It began subtly. Elise would catch fleeting glimpses of movement in the reflection of her bedroom window or hear faint whispers when the wind swept through the old wooden house. She chalked it up to grief making her imagination wild, but the incidents became harder to ignore. One late evening, as the sun cast its final orange glow across the horizon, Elise sat curled up on the living room couch with a blanket, sifting through old family photos. A floorboard creaked behind her, and she instinctively turned, expecting to see her cat. But the hallway was empty. Just as she was about to turn back, a shadow shifted, peeling itself away from the dimness and melting back into darkness. Her breath caught, heart pounding so loud it almost drowned out the faint whisper she swore she heard, "Elise." The next day, Elise's best friend, Jamie, stopped by with a basket of fresh apples from the orchard outside of town. "You've been cooped up for days," Jamie said with concern. "Let's go out, at least for a walk." Elise hesitated, glancing at the darkened corners of her home. They seemed deeper now, almost alive. "Yeah, maybe some fresh air will help." They walked through the frostbitten streets, chatting about memories from high school and the annual holiday parade that would soon fill the town square. As they passed the old church, Elise felt the chill intensify. She glanced at its towering steeple and, for a split second, saw a figure standing in the window, its silhouette thin and motionless. "Did you see that?" Elise grabbed Jamie's arm, pointing at the window. Jamie squinted. "See what?" Elise looked again. The window was empty. Back at home that night, she double-checked the locks and pulled the curtains tight. She settled in bed, pulling the covers to her chin, determined to ignore the creeping unease. Just as she was on the brink of sleep, a faint tapping echoed through the room. Her eyes shot open, and she listened, holding her breath. The sound grew louder, like fingers drumming insistently on the glass. Summoning her courage, she sat up and looked toward the window. Her room was dark, the thin sliver of moonlight casting a silver outline across the floor. She reached for her bedside lamp, fingers trembling. Light flooded the room, and her heart seized. Outside the window stood a face, pale and hollow-eyed, staring directly at her. Elise screamed and scrambled backward, tripping over her blankets and crashing to the floor. By the time she looked up again, the face was gone. She stumbled to the window, heart racing, and yanked the curtains aside. The street below was empty, leaves skittering across the pavement like whispers of laughter. The next day, Jamie came by again, visibly worried after Elise's frantic phone call. They spent the afternoon at the local library, researching folklore and ghost stories that might explain the eerie happenings. They found an old newspaper clipping from 1947 about a fire that had razed a portion of Evergreen Hollow, killing a dozen people trapped inside the church during a November service. One of the victims, a young woman named Margaret Elms, was rumored to haunt the town every year on the anniversary of her death, seeking out others marked by loss. Elise's blood ran cold. Her mother's passing had occurred on that same date in November years ago. That night, Jamie stayed over for support. They kept every light on and drank coffee to stay awake. The house was eerily quiet, as if holding its breath. Just past midnight, the air seemed to thicken, and the temperature dropped suddenly. The hairs on Elise's arms stood up. A soft voice drifted through the room, clearer this time. "Elise." Jamie's eyes widened as she heard it too. "What is that?" she whispered, grabbing Elise's arm. The voice grew louder, almost mournful. It came from the hallway. They stood, gripping each other as they stepped toward the sound. Shadows pooled at the base of the wall, and for a moment, a dark figure appeared, reaching out with one slender hand. "Leave me alone." Elise screamed, and suddenly, the room erupted in a violent gust of wind. The lamps flickered, and the photos on the wall rattled. The shadow shrieked, an agonized, inhuman sound, and then it was gone. The house fell silent once more, leaving nothing but the faint sound of their own panicked breathing. The morning light was pale and cold when they finally dared to move. Elise felt the weight lift from her chest, the heavy sadness dissipating as though something had been released. She looked at Jamie and managed a small, shaky smile. "I think it's over," she whispered, uncertain but hopeful. Outside, the first flurry of winter snow began to fall, covering Evergreen Hollow in a quiet, peaceful blanket. The town of Ravenshade was known for its chill November winds and the sprawling orchard that sat at its heart, long abandoned and shadowed by mystery. Growing up, Ava heard stories about the orchard, whispers of missing children and haunted spirits that lurked between the twisted trees. But those were tales meant to scare little kids. Or so she thought. This November, Ava found herself back in Ravenshade, visiting her parents for the first time in years. Life in the city had dulled her memory of the town's peculiar atmosphere, but stepping out of her car and feeling the sharp bite of the wind, it all came rushing back. The town hadn't changed much, same narrow streets, same crumbling storefronts, but the air felt different, heavier. "Look who's back," said old Mrs. Carmichael, her eyes squinting over her porch railing. "Be careful wandering after dark, Ava. The orchard still holds its secrets." Ava forced a polite smile, shoving the unsettling comment aside as old superstition. Yet, as the day slipped into evening, the feeling of being watched lingered, a prickling sensation at the back of her neck. She had always been curious, and despite her better judgment, she decided to visit the orchard under the deepening twilight. The wooden gate creaked as she pushed it open, the sound slicing through the stillness. Dead leaves crackled beneath her boots as she stepped into the orchard, the trees towering around her like silent sentinels. The last light of day painted the sky in hues of deep purple and gray, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for her as she moved deeper in. Ava took out her phone and snapped a few pictures, mostly to convince herself that nothing here was amiss. The screen flickered, the camera malfunctioning before the image froze on an unfamiliar face behind her shoulder. She spun around, heart thudding, but the path was empty. "Get a grip, Ava," she muttered, shoving her phone back into her pocket. A cold wind swept through the trees, carrying with it a soft, rhythmic sound, a child's laughter. It was faint at first, almost imagined, but then it came again, clearer and closer. Goosebumps rose on her arms. She followed the sound, unable to fight the pull of her curiosity. The orchard seemed to shift around her, the trees forming a labyrinth that didn't match her memory. She found herself at a clearing she didn't recognize, where the gnarled branches of the apple trees intertwined above like bony fingers. In the center stood an old wooden swing, swaying slowly on its own, creaking with each motion. The laughter came again, this time behind her. Ava spun around to see a girl, no older than 10, standing a few feet away. Her dress was a faded white, dirt-streaked and torn, and her eyes, wide and dark, held a hollow look that sent a shiver down Ava's spine. "Are you lost?" Ava's voice trembled as the question escaped. The girl tilted her head, lips curving into a small, unsettling smile. "They never found us," she whispered. Before Ava could react, a sudden rustling came from all sides, the sound of footsteps rushing through the fallen leaves. She turned in every direction, eyes darting between the shadows. Shapes emerged from the dark, more children appearing between the trees, their faces pale and expressionless. Some had hollow eyes, others bore scratch marks or bruises on their thin arms. Panic surged in Ava's chest as the realization hit her, the tales weren't just stories. The missing children, the ones the townspeople whispered about, had never truly left. She stumbled back, her foot catching on a root as the laughter intensified, echoing in her ears. She fell hard, pain shooting up her leg, but she barely registered it as she scrambled backward. The children stepped closer, their voices a chorus now, repeating, "They never found us." Ava's vision blurred with tears as she crawled toward the path, the cold seeping into her bones. The girl in the white dress knelt before her, tilting her head again, inches from Ava's face. Her voice was soft, almost kind. "Stay with us. They'll never look for you either." With a surge of adrenaline, Ava pushed herself up and bolted, limbs shaking and lungs burning. The path seemed endless, but the moon's pale glow finally shone through the break in the trees. She burst out of the orchard, collapsing onto the frost-covered grass, gasping for air. Behind her, the laughter faded, swallowed by the trees. She looked back once, the swing now still, the clearing empty. But the feeling of eyes watching from the shadows remained. November winds howled as she stumbled home, the town of Ravenshade dark and silent, keeping its secrets locked within the twisted branches of the old orchard. In the small town of Cold Hollow, November was a month wrapped in mist and whispers. It was a place where the days grew short and the nights stretched out like a dark canvas, punctuated by the distant calls of owls and the rustle of dry, fallen leaves. The townspeople knew better than to venture far after dusk, for the tales told by their grandparents carried warnings, legends of lost voices that echoed through the woods at the town's edge. Erin, a high school junior, had never put much stock in these stories. She considered them the product of overactive imaginations and small-town lore. Her friends, Tom and Lisa, felt the same. That's why, on a dare one evening, the trio decided to explore the woods behind Cold Hollow High. It was their last year together before college, and they wanted a memory that would last. The air was sharp and damp as they slipped through a break in the chain-link fence behind the school. Tom led the way, flashlight bobbing as he cut through the underbrush, while Lisa held tight to Erin's arm, giggling nervously. "Do you hear that?" Tom called out suddenly, stopping in his tracks. Erin and Lisa fell silent, straining to listen. The wind howled, and for a moment, it sounded like a low, mournful wail. Lisa shivered, but Erin forced a laugh. "It's just the wind," she said, although even she wasn't convinced. They pressed on, the flashlight casting long, skeletal shadows across the trees. The deeper they went, the quieter it became, until in the small town of Cold Hollow, November was a month wrapped in mist and whispers. It was a place where the days grew short and the nights stretched out like a dark canvas, punctuated by the distant calls of owls and the rustle of dry, fallen leaves. The townspeople knew better than to venture far after dusk, for the tales told by their grandparents carried warnings, legends of lost voices that echoed through the woods at the town's edge. Erin, a high school junior, had never put much stock in these stories. She considered them the product of overactive imaginations and small-town lore. Her friends, Tom and Lisa, felt the same. That's why, on a dare one evening, the trio decided to explore the woods behind Cold Hollow High. It was their last year together before college, and they wanted a memory that would last. The air was sharp and damp as they slipped through a break in the chain-link fence behind the school. Tom led the way, flashlight bobbing as he cut through the underbrush, while Lisa held tight to Erin's arm, giggling nervously. "Do you hear that?" Tom called out suddenly, stopping in his tracks. Erin and Lisa fell silent, straining to listen. The wind howled, and for a moment, it sounded like a low, mournful wail. Lisa shivered, but Erin forced a laugh. "It's just the wind," she said, although even she wasn't convinced. They pressed on, the flashlight casting long, skeletal shadows across the trees. The deeper they went, the quieter it became, until the only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. Erin's unease grew, but she pushed it down, determined to keep up the brave front. Tom stopped again, this time tilting his head as if trying to make out a faint noise. Erin followed his gaze, and her heart skipped a beat. From somewhere in the distance, a soft, childlike singing drifted through the trees. The voice was clear, carrying an old melody she didn't recognize. Who else would be out here? Lisa whispered, her fingers digging into Erin's arm. Before Erin could answer, Tom turned back with a grin that wavered on the edge of fear. Probably just some kid messing with us, he said, his voice too loud. Come on, let's find them and scare them back. He took a few steps forward before a sharp crack rang out, like the snap of a branch, and the singing stopped. Silence swallowed the woods, thicker than before. Lisa looked at Aaron, her eyes wide and glistening. Maybe we should go back, Aaron suggested, her confidence waning. But Tom shook his head, his stubbornness flaring. We've come this far, he muttered. We can't chicken out now. He moved ahead, and Aaron felt the pull of both dread and loyalty. She and Lisa followed, their breaths clouding in the cold November air. The deeper they ventured, the more Aaron noticed how wrong everything felt. The trees seemed to close in tighter, their bare branches reaching out like claws. Then they saw it, a clearing lit by the dim light of the crescent moon. At the center was an old, weather-beaten cabin, its shutters hanging loose, and its wooden frame groaning in the wind. It looked abandoned, but a flicker of movement caught Aaron's eye. A shadow passed by the cracked window. Tom, don't, Aaron hissed, but he was already inching closer. The door creaked open before they reached it, and a figure stepped out. It was a woman, her face hidden under a hood. Her long, bony fingers held a lantern that cast a pale, golden glow. She looked at them with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sorrow and anger. You shouldn't be here, she said, her voice a hoarse whisper that sent chills down Aaron's spine. Tom stuttered, his bravado crumbling. We were just leaving. The woman's gaze shifted to Lisa and then settled on Aaron, narrowing as if recognizing something in her. The woods remember. They remember those who trespass. Before anyone could react, a low, guttural sound rose from beneath the cabin, vibrating through the earth. The singing started again, louder now, with multiple voices layering over one another. It wasn't just one child, it was a chorus of them, each voice tinged with despair. The woman stepped back into the shadows, and the lantern's light snuffed out. The chorus of voices grew, weaving into a cacophony that made Aaron's blood turn to ice. Run! Aaron shouted, breaking the spell. The three of them bolted for the edge of the clearing, feet stumbling over roots and fallen branches. The singing turned into shrieks, echoing and overlapping, chasing them as they ran. Aaron dared a glance back and saw shadowy figures darting between the trees, small, ghostly shapes with hollow eyes. Lisa screamed as a cold hand brushed against her arm, and she sped ahead, tripping through the brambles. Tom shouted something unintelligible, but Aaron couldn't look back. The edge of the woods came into view, the safety of the school fence just beyond it. They burst out from the tree line, gasping for air, and tumbled onto the frosty grass. The singing stopped as abruptly as it started, leaving only the sound of their ragged breathing and the distant rustle of the November wind. Aaron sat up, heart hammering, and looked back. The woods stood silent and dark, but she knew now that the stories were true. Cold Hollow's woods held memories, memories that whispered, sang, and screamed, waiting for those foolish enough to wander too far. Love these stories? YouTube algorithm suggests that you would like to listen to these stories. Click on the video on the screen.